Hello and welcome to the CEWA Future Leaders Project Talent Identification Component Trial. My name's Dr. Shane Glasson. I'm the project leader and I welcome you to the trial and thank you so much for your participation. This information video is designed to give you the background to the project and also to hopefully answer all of your questions with regard to what is in store for you as a participant in the trial of our Talent ID project. So let's kick it off. As the famous author Simon Sinek says, we should always start with the why when it comes to any sort of project. So the why when it comes to CEWA is that we actually have a problem when it comes to identifying the next generation of our high quality faith-filled leaders. And the problem has a number of elements. So the first element is this. We have a traditional reliance upon self-nomination for leadership development purposes. So what that means is, in the past, we have relied upon good people to come forward and to stick their hand up to be developed as leaders. But the problem with that is that there's a whole group of people who usually remain undiscovered. That is, people with significant leadership talent. The second problem we face as a system is called the halo effect. Now, the halo effect in simple terms simply means that when any leader thinks about themselves and what they believe is really strong about their leadership, they develop a bit of a halo above their heads. And this halo extends to people who reflect back to them the same sort of characteristics. So oftentimes what we find in CEWA is that the sort of people being put forward for leadership development tend to reflect in many cases the leaders who have nominated them. So we want to get beyond this. We want to get to that group of people that are largely undiscovered in schools and at system level. Maybe those people that are not resonating with their leaders, people who have a different skill set. Now, the third problem is, as I've already said, that a lot of talented individuals just remain undiscovered in the system. So they don't self-nominate. They're not nominated by their existing leaders, their principals, for example, and they just simply toil away undiscovered. And the next issue relates to the fact that Catholic school leadership is becoming increasingly complex over time. So therefore, when we're looking for our next generation of leaders, we need to find people who are able to cope with ambiguity and complexity. If you like, people that have a real stomach for that. And finally, overriding all of this is that we actually have a really aging leadership workforce. So if you look at our current stock of principals and assistant and vice principals, they're an aging group. They're within their 50s. So realistically, in the next 10 years, many of our existing leaders will reach or exceed retirement age. So there's a fair bit of urgency around finding our next generation. Now, you may have heard of Gonski 2.0. So this slide shows a quote that's lifted directly from Gonski's report. And it talks about the need for systems like CEWA to begin identifying the next generation of quality leaders and then actually working with those people to develop them appropriately for leadership vacancies as they arise. So this project actually represents a possible solution. And the whole project is called the CEWA Future Leaders Project. And it actually has three pillars, which you can see on the slide before you now. So pillar one is really relates to what you're about to participate in. It's our talent identification process. So in other words, how can we get out there and in a really unbiased way, find people with the attributes required to lead before bringing them into what's called pillar two, leadership development according to their needs and their aspirations. And then pillar three is to work with those people that we identify to encourage and position them for leadership vacancies, as I said, that match their desires and their capabilities. So what you're about to participate in is actually called the talent identification component. So what does this component seek to do? Well, it seeks to identify what we call a very special group of people known as our high potentials. In other words, the top 5% of our organisation with the attributes required to lead. So what are we looking for specifically? So when we talk about high potentials in CEWA, We're talking about those people that are resolutely committed to the vision and the values of our organisation. We're looking for really resilient people, those who can really bounce back from failure and adversity, and also people that are open to learning, so they have a growth mindset, and people that are innovative in their practice. We're looking for people that are really driven, so motivated people, but also people that don't just talk a good game, but they actually deliver quality when it comes to their role and their responsibilities. In line with the role model of Jesus Christ, we want people that are relational and are capable of building trust with other people, so they're trustworthy. And as I said before, we want to find people that are able to thrive in complex, constantly changing environments. And finally, we're looking for people that are able to effectively lead change in the Catholic tradition. And this is important because change is all around us. Education is beset by change. So therefore, we need people who are capable of A, being open to change, and B, leading it well. So the next slide's a really important one because, and I want to draw your attention to the asterisks at the bottom of the screen. Engagement in the talent ID process is completely voluntary and it will never be a prerequisite for promotion. So in other words, people can go nowhere near our talent ID process and they can still achieve leadership roles. So this is for everybody, but our talent ID process is specifically for people who want really good information on where they're at, on their capabilities. So we actually think this process will be very attractive to teachers out there, and you might be a teacher yourself. Someone who just craves a bit of information, some good feedback on their leadership potential. However, anyone can actually opt into the talent ID process. So members of the non-teaching staff. There might be staff from central offices, either the leaderable office or one of the regional offices, and school and central office people who are already in leadership roles who are seeking a promotion, say to the next level or an alternative sideways promotion. So the process is for all. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, okay, what's involved? So the slide that you're looking at the moment outlines the 4 stages of what we're calling the CEWA Talent ID funnel. So the first 3 stages are part of the talent ID process. So stage 1 is what is known as a Future Leaders 360. So that's the stage you're about to undertake at the moment. People that receive really strong data on their Future Leaders 360 progress to stage 2, which is a learning agility assessment. And I'll talk more about what that means as this presentation goes on. People that get great data on their learning agility assessment move to stage 3, which is a leadership conversation. It goes for about an hour and a half, and it's a one-to-one conversation conducted over the telephone with an organisational psychologist. And stage 3 really tries to give a person a read on their gut for complexity. Stage 2 and 3 are outsourced to our partner provider, Kaya Consulting, and I'll talk about them as we go through this information session. Now, if you make it through all 3 stages, you enter what is known as our high potential pool. So that top 5% of our organisation, the top 5% with the attributes required to lead effectively. And you will go through quite an intensive process of development, encouragement and positioning for roles that actually match your desires and your capabilities. So I'll talk more about that toward the end of this presentation. But before we get into detail about stage 1, I need to cover off some broad information for you. So here's the first one. This entire process is completely confidential. And my commitment to you is that your data will not be revealed to anybody other than yourself and me as the project leader. So it goes something like this. Even if our executive director, Dr. Deborah Sayce, asked to see your data, my response to Deborah would be, I need to seek the person's permission first. And if you were to say to me, I'm not comfortable with that, that would be my response to Deborah. Now, Why am I emphasising confidentiality? Well, it's important because when anyone goes through a process that reveals data about their strengths and their limitations, that can be a very threatening process for a person. So please rest assured that this process is bound by the strictest confidentiality protocols. So, what's your role? Well, by participating in this trial of the Talent ID process, you're actually helping us to refine our funnel, so to refine our 4 stages, and develop criteria for flow through for future generations that will go through this process. So you might be thinking, well, what's in it for me, apart from helping CEWA to develop something pretty unique for its people? Well, the first thing that's in it for you is really the opportunity to get your fingerprints on this systemic change process, or to shift the way that we identify and then develop and recruit our leaders. You've also got an opportunity to receive valuable feedback about your leadership strengths and, importantly, where your leadership is weak, where there are gaps, with the view to actually closing those gaps and accelerating what you're already good at. As I've already said, there's an opportunity for you to be identified as a CEWA high potential. And that's really exciting because to get into that group, that top 5% of our organisation, not only is it a real badge of honour and something to be celebrated, but it's an opportunity for you to become known through the system. And as I said, there's an opportunity for you to receive quality, targeted leadership development to really take you to the next level in your leadership. And that's whether you're leading as a teacher or leading in the front office or leading in a current formal role. So let's get into what you're about to go through. So this is stage 1, the Future Leaders 360. And as the name suggests, this is really your opportunity to examine yourself in terms of where you think you're strong and where your leadership gaps are, but also to get some valuable feedback from people around you. So people above you, so that could be your principal, or if you're in a primary school, let's say your assistant principal that you report to, your colleagues, and also people that report to you, if that is the case. So what is the 360 built on? Well, it's actually built on the 4 strategic directions of CEWA. So the first one, and you might know the acronym LEAD, so the L in LEAD stands for learning. So we're looking for people that are open to learning and are innovative in their practices. We're looking for people who can engage well with others by being trustworthy and relational. We're looking for people that are highly accountable. So in other words, they can be trusted to deliver, and they're also very, very motivated to achieve. And finally, we're looking for people that are absolutely committed to what we stand for in Catholic Ed WA, discipleship, very much role modelled on the person of Jesus Christ. So in order to come up with the 360 questions that you're about to go through, what the reference group did is we had a look at the theory behind high potential leadership. We looked at our reality in CEWA and we thought, well, okay, how can we take that theory and actually use this to define what we think is quality leadership? And then we mapped it to our 4 strategic directions, otherwise known as LEAD. So this is what the theory says about high potential people. It says that they're into mastery. Now, mastery is a bit of a misleading term. Mastery does not mean expertise. Mastery means that you constantly try to learn something. So to learn something new every day. So we want that in our people. But we also want people that are adaptable, who can shift and change according to the demands that they face. So the reference group found that there was a lot of crossover between mastery and adaptation, and we ended up calling this attribute being open. The literature for high potentials also talks about 2 processes called exploration and integration. Now, exploration occurs when a person faces a problem and they think, how am I going to solve this? So they get out there and they try and harvest new ideas, new ways of doing things to solve the problem that they might be facing. So those ideas could come from colleagues, if you're in a school, or it could come from people in different schools or different organisations, or from the world of theory. So once you find solutions through exploration and you play with them, you work out what works and what doesn't, you actually integrate what works into your normal pattern of work, into your workflow, and you share your learning with colleagues. So the reference group found there was a lot of crossover between these two processes, so we call this being innovative. So when you're open to learning and you're innovative in your approach to problem solving, you are actually a learner. So there's the link to lead, the L of our strategic directions. The high potential literature also talks about these two things, trust and modelling, and they need very little explanation. So the reference group are looking for trustworthy people who really build trust in line with our role model of Jesus Christ, being a Catholic system. The literature around high potentials also talks about their ability to lead with heart. In other words, we want relational people. So when you are trustworthy and relational, you're very capable of engaging with other people. Hence the E in our LEAD strategic directions acronym. The high potential literature talks about people that are really driven. So they're highly motivated people. And of course, we want that. The literature also talks about people that are very reliable. And when you're motivated to achieve in the context of your role, and you are very reliable, so you can be counted upon, you are an accountable individual. Hence the A in our LEAD strategic direction acronym. And finally, the high potential literature really talks about people that are resolutely committed to the vision and the values of their organisation. So we want people that are committed to discipleship. So the reference group took those 7 attributes listed under the reality, and we created 60 questions for our Future Leaders 360. So again, as the name suggests, you're about to answer these 60 questions about yourself, about your leadership attributes, and we ask you to select 7 to 10 people who work above you, beside you, and if possible below you, to answer the same 60 questions about you. The survey is very straightforward. It will take about 10 minutes. It is online. And the link that you've received in your email is used to activate the survey. I ask you not to do that until the end of this information session. But again, the survey will take you and your colleagues about 10 minutes to complete. So it's not particularly arduous. So what happens after your survey is complete? Well, I'll be coming to your diocese to conduct either a face-to-face debrief for you around the Future Leaders 360, or I'll be doing it by teleconference. Now, what's interesting here, when you come in for your debrief, you're going to get a report. It's very comprehensive, and it's front-ended by the 2 feedback circles that you can see now on the screen. So the first is your self-perceptions according to the 7 high potential attributes and the way you answer the 60 questions. And then you get a second circle, this is called others, where the aggregated responses of your data sources are grouped together. Now in this particular scenario, this person receives a very pleasant surprise because clearly others are saying that they are stronger than they perceive themselves to be. So through this debrief, and the debrief goes for around about 3 hours, you're going to get a lot of really high quality data on where you believe you are strong versus the opinions of your trusted people that you've invited to be raters. So it's quite a revealing activity. And as I said, I'll either be doing your debrief face-to-face in Broome, or if you're out further from Broome, I'll be doing your debrief over the telephone. But either way, you're going to get some really great data about your strengths and your limitations when it comes to leadership. Now, toward the end of the debrief, everybody goes through a development planning exercise. So the idea is I'm going to give you a structure that you can use to take the data from the debrief and create a development plan for yourself. Now, the development plan is pitched at a 3-month time frame. And the idea is we're going to focus on where you're strong and where your gaps are, and create some goals, some coaching goals for your improvement. So everybody goes through this process as part of the debrief. Beyond the debrief, so the week after, you receive a notification by email as to whether you are through to stage 2 of the Talent ID process or not. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what happens if I don't progress beyond stage 1? Does that mean I'm no good? Does that mean I'll never be considered for a leadership role? Well, the answer is no. The answer is you've simply got some work to do. And we're not in the process of writing people off. So the first thing I say to you if you're in this situation is just beware of negativity bias. So that thought that you are no good, that you're useless, that you're never going to be a leader in CEWA, it's simply not true. As I said, it just means you've got some work to do. I say this to you though, if you do miss out, don't take the nuclear option. In other words, you're not to go back and hunt down those raters from your school or your office that you think have given you adverse information or adverse feedback. Please remember that these are trusted colleagues who have taken the time to give you feedback on your performance. So the encouragement is that you don't do that. Instead, what we want you to do is this. We want you to focus on your data that you get from your 360. Celebrate where you are strong and accept your gaps, and then do the following. Pick yourself up, drive your own development, and have another go. Please remember that this is what we want you to do. So even if you exit our talent funnel, you can come back in a year and actually have another go. But what we want to see is that you have developed yourself. So how can you do that? Well, one way is through our learning portal called Clan Ed. So on Clan Ed, what I've done is created a Clan Ed board called the Future Leaders 360. And as you can see on the screen, there are 25 online learning programs specifically targeted at the Future Leaders 360. In fact, this Clan Ed board is organised according to those 7 high potential attributes. So there are 19 LinkedIn learning programs. Now they're very short programs. They're between about 30 minutes and 2 hours in duration. And there are 6 edX programs, and I'll talk about edX in a minute. But what we give you as well, if you exit the funnel at this stage, is a free membership to LinkedIn Learning. And that LinkedIn Learning membership is worth about $500. So because we are committed to your development, you get that as a gift for being involved in this process. So here's an example of a LinkedIn Learning course. So this is called Developing Yourself Through Failure. And this very much links to that attribute of being open to learning. Now, this program goes for around about an hour. And what it does, it's high quality online leadership development that you can actually engage with from the comfort of your lounge room in your tracksuit pants. So it's a real development opportunity. And for people up in the Broom Diocese who might find it really difficult to get to face-to-face PD, this could be a good option for you. Now, I mentioned edX programs as well. Just for your information, edX is these programs are free, and it's a conglomeration of some of the world's leading universities. You can see that this program, Leaders of Learning, is from Harvard University. So these programs are longer. They're between 4 and 6 weeks in duration, and they usually require about 2 to 4 hours of commitment per week. And as I said, these programs are free. But what you can do is spend about $100, and what you get at the end of edX programs is a certificate of completion from the host university. So this is brilliant if you want to list this on your CV as professional learning that you've engaged with, and it will also specifically help you with the Future Leaders 360 attributes that we're sampling for. Now, by the way, if you just want to do edX programs in your own time, simply jump onto the website, EDX, register, and then sign in, and you can access all of the courses on the edX site, and there are hundreds of them. By the way, with LinkedIn Learning, your membership will open the whole LinkedIn Learning Library to you. And that library consists of about 6,000 professional learning programs. So chances are, if you're interested in finding out, let's say, about hard conversations, if you've got one coming up at work, you can type that into the search bar on LinkedIn Learning and it will bring up a range of short courses for you. So the membership actually opens the whole library for you as well. And before we move on, just to reiterate that even if you don't progress beyond stage 1, go and drive your own learning, come back in a year and you can have another go. You re-enter the talent funnel back at stage 1. So let's now look at stage 2. So I said at the start, people that get great data on stage 1 are invited into stage 2, and this is outsourced to our program partner, our project partner, CEWA Consulting, who are a group of organisational psychologists, and they're based all around the world. They have an office in Perth. So stage 2 actually assesses learning agility. And you might be thinking, well, what is that? Well, learning agility is really your ability to learn something rapidly in one situation and then apply the learning very quickly in a new and challenging leadership situation. And it's actually made up of 7 facets or 7 elements. So this tool assesses these 7 things. The first is called interpersonal acumen. In other words, your ability to connect with and relate to other people. It actually assesses cognitive perspective. In other words, your ability to solve problems. It assesses EQ, which is wrapped up in this phrase, environmental mindfulness. So in other words, your ability to read the play in situations and adjust your approach accordingly. It measures drive to excel. In other words, your level of motivation to achieve, which of course we sampled as well in stage 1. It measures your self-insight. So in other words, do you know really where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are? It assesses your ability to lead change. So this fancy term called change alacrity. And finally, it assesses feedback responsiveness. In other words, your ability to seek feedback about your performance, to reflect on it, and to change your behaviours as a result. So Talent 7 is actually conducted online and it's a self-review. There's 148 questions, they're multiple choice, and the time frame is between 20 and 30 minutes for completion. Now, Talent 7 is a validated tool that is used globally by organisations seeking to uncover high potential people. So when I say it's validated, it means that the tool has been rigorously studied statistically and it actually measures what it purports to measure. So this is a very accurate tool. So you do this online from the comfort of your own lounge room, and then about a week after you finish the assessment, you actually go through a learning agility assessment debrief. Now, because you're up in the Broom Diocese, you're in the regions, your debrief will take place over the phone with an organisational psychologist from CEWA Consulting, and it will take about an hour. But through this debrief, you're actually going to get a deeper understanding of your leadership potential. So you receive a report that is debriefed, and the dashboard looks something like this. So you're looking at slide 40 now, the slide with all the domes on it. And very quickly, what it shows is if your dial is to the right, so into that deep green, that is a leadership disposition. If your dial is to your left, so into the mint green, that is a managerial disposition, technical managerial disposition. And if you're in a red zone either side, that is what is called an overuse behaviour or a derailer. In other words, when you overuse a leadership strength, it can become a weakness. And if you overuse a managerial strength, it can become a weakness. So just to put this in context, you can see the 7 facets I just talked about around the outside of the middle dome. If you find the one that says drive to excel. So remember, this is about being driven. It's about motivation. So, a person with a profile, like you can see here, certainly has a leadership disposition when it comes to their motivation, their drive. But the problem is it's in an overuse zone. So, a person like this would find it very, very hard to switch off. In other words, they would never be off. They'd be thinking about work all the time, even in their private time. And the problem with that, that can have detrimental effects on mental exhaustion and burnout. It can have detrimental effects on personal relationships. But also, if you're leading people and you have that disposition, there's every chance that you could burn them out or set a really negative impression of how leadership should be. So, for a person like that, the advice would be they need to dial it back a bit and really learn how to relax. So, again, you're going to get some detailed information about your leadership potential from this particular tool. But the question arises, so what happens if your data is not tremendous when it comes to stage 2? What happens to you? And clearly we're looking for people with a leadership disposition here on this tool. Well, just like with stage 1, we have developed a ClanEd board for Talent 7, and it actually has 38 programs on it, listed according to the 7 facets that the tool assesses. So there are 31 LinkedIn Learning programs, and there are 7 edX programs. And again, I talked about that with stage 1. So the idea is we want you to pick yourself up off the mat if you don't get through, drive your own development, and then in a year and a half, come back and say to me, hey Shane, I've driven my learning in this way. I've done 10 of the LinkedIn Learning programs. I've done 3 of the edX programs. I've done this, and this, and I think I'm ready for another shot. And on the provision you've done that, you'll be welcomed back into the Talent ID funnel at stage 2. So you don't have to go back to stage 1. You actually re-enter at the stage that you exit from. So now we're on to stage 3. And again, this is an outsourced stage, the final stage of the Talent ID process. So this is called the leadership conversation. So again, this is a one-to-one 90-minute leadership conversation with an organisational psychologist. And this will happen over the telephone. So everyone has their conversation over the phone to create a level playing field. Now again, this is a bespoke tool, so it's been designed for CEWA. However, it's also been validated. So this is not an airy-fairy process. This is actually a rigorous 90-minute conversation. And it's designed to assess your gut for complexity. So it assesses these things. When you're faced with a problem, can you think in multiple dimensions? So can you think in the present and in the future as well? Can you discern right versus right decisions? So in other words, if you're facing a really tough choice and there are 3 possible solutions, how do you discern between those 3 solutions to get the best solution, even though the other 2 are equally right or they appear that way on the surface? The conversation assesses your ability to make apt decisions, so those that are appropriate and timely. It's all about whether you can seek and integrate new information, align people's capabilities with goals that you're trying to achieve, whether you have an internal locus of control, so whether you actually believe that you're in charge of your own destiny. And finally, it's all about your ability to simplify complexity, so to take really complex situations and frame it in a way that the people that you're interacting with and leading can understand it. Now, be warned that this conversation is deliberately challenging. So in the hour and a half, the org psych will only ask you 5 questions. And they won't interact with you deliberately. So the whole thing is designed to be an awkward encounter. What the org psych is listening for in your language and in the examples you're using are the things that I just talked about, the things that you can see on this screen. So again, the question you might be asking is, what happens if you don't get through stage 3? So you're not identified as a high potential after your leadership conversation. Well, it's the same thing as stage 1 and 2. We have a ClanEd board for you with 33 online programs that are specifically designed to shift your gut for complexity. So again, we ask you, engage with this. engage with any other learning, either at work or professional learning, or anything that you believe will shift your gut for complexity. And then we say, come back again. The time frame is a bit different. We say, come back to us in about 3 years, because research would say that 3 years is the minimum that is required with focused effort to shift your gut for complexity. And if you come back to us in 3 years and show us what you've done, we will say, we'll welcome you back into stage 3 again. So you don't have to loop back to stage 1 or redo stage 2, you re-enter at stage 3. So then we're into this very important stage 4. So in the event that you are identified as a high potential after progressing through stage 1, 2, and 3, what is there for you? What do we do? Well, the first thing we say to you is, here's an option. We have a ClanEd board for our high potentials with 20 programs on it. So if you're into online learning, or if you're in a region like yours, which is quite isolated, here are 20 high quality programs that you can engage with to really develop yourself as a high potential. The other thing is, I will meet with you either one-on-one, face-to-face, or by Skype or by teleconference, and we have a very long discussion around your background, as well as your data and your aspirations. So where do you see yourself in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? And I have a whole series of supports that I can offer you as the person responsible for developing our high potentials. So we have an exploratory conversation. One option that is open to you is a program developed between CEWA and the Australian Institute of Management WA. It's called our High Potential Program. Now, this program is hosted in Perth over 5 half days. And if you're identified as a high potential, you will be offered the opportunity to participate in this program. And we have system funding that will assist you, given the vast distances that you would need to travel to participate in the program. So there's another option. We also have a suite of leadership programs that you might be aware of. So for example, if you're a Kimberley person and you're identified as a high potential, on the provision that you meet all the markers, you might be invited into the Aspiring Principals Program, which is our 2-year principal preparation offering. But we also have a whole suite of other leadership programs to meet the career stage that you're in and your aspiration and desires. But the good news is that our high potentials get direct entry into these programs as well. So there's another option for your development. Okay, so you might be thinking now, all right, what's the timeline? Where to from here? So first of all, you have received a separate email from an email called noreply@cewafl.com. This email contains a link to your survey. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So beyond this information session, I ask you to activate the survey, and that link will be live now until Friday, the 19th of October, when it closes. So you've got plenty of time. I do suggest, and I'll talk about it in a second, that you meet individually or speak to people who will be feeding into your 360, because that's the important first stage. So I will be up in Broome between Monday the 29th and Wednesday the 31st of October this year. And if you are in Broome or near Broome, you will be invited to come in for a face-to-face debrief on your data from the Future Leaders 360. Now, if you're far away from Broome, don't despair. We will have a teleconference debrief between Monday the 29th and Wednesday the 31st of October. And then the intention is that you will receive your email advising whether or not you're progressing to stage 2 of the process on Wednesday the 7th of November. Now, our admin assistant, Delana Ramirez, will be sending you that information, and her details are here on the screen as well. But what I ask you to do between now and the debrief is to contact Delana by phone or email and book in your Future Leaders 360 debrief, because it's important that you know whether it's face-to-face or whether it's by teleconference and the time of that debrief. So let's have a look now at setting up your Future Leaders 360. So I want you to start giving some thought to your raters. Now, you can see on the screen now, the raters can be your peers. So in other words, colleagues that are employed at the same level as you. So if you're a teacher, you should be thinking about other teachers that you would like to feed into your 360. If you have direct reports, so if you're an assistant principal, for example, you might have people that report to you. So give some thought as to who you would like from that group to feed into your review. If there are support staff members at your school who you feel would give you really high quality data, by all means invite them. So they could be front office receptionists or grounds people. And of course, there are others. But please remember that you also need to include your principal. That is a mandatory person if you're in a school who must contribute. If you're at a head office, it would be the leader that you report to, but they must be involved in the 360 process. Now, if you've transferred from a school recently, ex-colleagues can be used from different settings, but I do ask that recency is important here. So if you've been in your new school for over a year, recency just does not exist. But if you've transferred recently, by all means use colleagues from another environment. The minimum is 7 and the maximum is 10 raters. And please choose people that you trust to give you high quality information. And here's my warning. Do not select people who dislike you, because you've got to remember that this is, in addition to receiving feedback, this is a talent ID process, and the quality of your data will determine whether you move to the next stage. And if you're choosing people you've been in disagreement with, that could hamper your progress. So when you're ready, everyone, you can set up your 360. So in the email I talked about, there's a link. If you click on the link, enter the username and password supplied in the email, you'll be taken to a screen where you need to then plug in some information. First of all, the first name, surname, and email address of your supervisor. So that could be your principal or the person that you ultimately report to. And then you actually add in the first name, surname, email addresses, and relationship for each of your raters. But before you do that, it's a good idea to talk to your raters to make sure that they're okay answering the 60 questions about you. So after that, you click the button that says begin, read the homepage instructions, and all you need to do then is answer the 60 questions for your survey using the scale. And I do ask that you read the scale very, very carefully before you answer question 1. Because there is a tendency sometimes for people just to mix up the scale. So read the scale first, respond to each of the 60 questions intuitively, and it should take you really no more than 10 minutes to complete your survey. What will happen then, all of your raters will receive an email asking them to contribute to your review, and they will answer the same 60 questions about you. And this is what I ask from there. Make sure you stalk your raters. So in other words, follow up with them, encourage them to complete your survey, and note that it closes at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, the 19th of October. And of course, our admin assistant, Delana, will be in touch with you as the 360 unfolds, just to give you a reminder, to give you the names of outstanding raters who haven't contributed, and we ask that you follow up with them. Now, if you have any technical problems with the 360, please contact Delana and she will assist you. And likewise, if your raters have problems, please contact Delana. She will handle everything to do with the mechanical side of the 360. And finally, if you have any questions about the Talent ID process or the Future Leaders Project in general, please feel free to contact me. My details are there on the screen. And the final thing I'd like to say is a huge thank you to you for contributing to this really important systemic initiative. I wish you well, and I hope you get some great feedback about your leadership potential or your leadership capability as you go through. Thank you again.